Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Father.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
So Johnny, a very bright 5-year-old boy, told his daddy that he'd like a baby brother, and along with his request, offered to do whatever he could to help. So his dad said, after pausing for a moment, "I'll tell you what, Johnny, if you pray every day for 2 months for a baby brother, I guarantee that God will give you one." Johnny responded eagerly to his dad's challenge and went to his bedroom early that night to start praying for a baby brother. He prayed every night for a whole month. But after that time, he began to get skeptical. He checked around the neighborhood and found out that what he thought was going to happen had never occurred in the history of his neighborhood. You just don't pray for 2 months and then whammo, a new baby brother. So little 5-year-old Johnny quit praying. After another month, Johnny's mother went to the hospital. When she came back home, Johnny's parents called him into the bedroom. He cautiously walked into the room, not expecting to find anything, and there was a little bundle lying right next to his mother. His dad pulled back the blanket, and there was not one baby brother, but 2. His mother had twins. Johnny's dad looked down at him and said, "Now, aren't you glad you prayed?" Johnny hesitated for a moment and then looked up at his dad and said, "Yes, Dad, but aren't you glad I quit when I did?" In any case, that's little quip does, I promise you, relate to the sermon by the end. But in any case, today we have the gospel reading, and it says, "A young man came to Jesus and said, 'Good teacher.'" So respectful, right? It's like someone coming to me saying, "Good father," "Good rabbi," "Good teacher," right? "Good teacher, what good thing shall I do to have eternal life?" And so Jesus, as he normally did, gave them something to think about before he gives them an answer. So he says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, and that is God. But if you want to have eternal life, keep the commandments." Right? And so, this is very important because he wants the young man to start thinking about who Jesus is. He is the good teacher, but what does that mean? What does that entail? Why are you calling me good? It doesn't say, "Don't call me good." He says, "Why are you calling me good?" But if you want to enter into eternal life, keep the commandments. And so the young man says, "Which ones? Which commandments?" And Jesus says, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother," and the last one he does is, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Now, does anyone notice anything about the list that Jesus gives him? Shall not murder, shall not commit adultery, etc., etc. From the 10 Commandments, absolutely. Anything else?
The last one is just the one that he gave before.
The last one is not one of the 10 Commandments, right? Jesus throws in one at the end that's probably knocked this kid off his feet. Love your neighbor as yourself. Wait a minute, what? But the young man was involved in the litany, so at first he's just like, yeah, I kept all those from my youth up. And so Jesus says, "Really? You kept all these from your youth up?" Obviously, the last one, love your neighbor as yourself, he didn't do it. So Jesus says, "All right, fine." And by the way, the young man asks, "What do I still lack?" Jesus says, "If you want to be perfect, go sell what you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." So the young man, after saying, "I did all this stuff," what am I still lacking? You know? He doesn't quite buy the fact that Jesus is the Messiah. And so Jesus tells him, give everything you have away and quit your job and come on. Follow me. But when the young man heard the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had many possessions. And Jesus said to his disciples, assuredly I say unto you, it is hard for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now a lot of people sit there and think that poor Bill Gates, he's not going to have a hard time getting into heaven. But I'm here to tell you that every person in this room is a rich man. And if you don't believe me, let's take a mission trip to Africa sometime, or to the middle of Nepal, or something like that, and we'll see. You'll see that we are all rich by biblical definition in this room. So Jesus is actually talking about us. So why does Jesus say this? Well, it's in response to the first man, the rich man is sorrowful, right? He's sorrowful. Why? Why is he really sad? Why is the rich man sad? Anyone want to take a stab at it? For what? What doesn't he want to give up his stuff for? What does he think is not worth it? Or well, at least what does he think is an unfair trade? A relationship with God.
Right.
A relationship with God. What? I got to give up everything just to have a relationship with God? And the answer is, yep, everything belongs to God. Right? And so we don't actually have to give everything away. Like, none of us are going to go out and empty our bank accounts and send it somewhere. But the truth is, you better believe all of us are going to be giving all of our stuff away before the day we die. The question is whether it's voluntarily and to the right thing. Because once we hit that casket, we all go from being rich to being poor unless we have the one thing needful, and that's the grace of God. An interactive relationship with God. And so, when we discuss, tithing and all this stuff, it's with the understanding that everything belongs to God. And it's not about paying church bills and things like that. So, this coming month, we need to talk about that stuff. But we talked about this in the parish council meeting. It is not about paying bills. It is about a proper relationship with God. Because when we give money to God, whether it be to the church, and no, not all our tithing does go to the church, and nor should it. I mean, a lot needs to go to other people who need things. We'll get to that in a minute, but at this point, maybe the parish council's cringing like, Father, what are you saying? We need to pay the bills. But the point is the proper attitude of a relationship with God. And one of the things that we need to do, and that Jesus is challenging us to do, challenging the rich man, but again, this is all of us, is the fact that the rich man didn't necessarily want to get down and dirty with the needy folk, right? Why do I have to actually talk to these people and engage them directly? Don't my taxes go to help these poor people, right? We think of Christmas Carol, right? Ebenezer Scrooge and aren't there poorhouses? Isn't that what my taxes go to? So let's not get down and dirty with our actual neighbor, with poor people. Let's have the government do everything. No, we're to have direct relationship as Christians with others. That's why we've always had ministries in this church that do precisely that. Lord tells us that there's more required of us. That we do have to do uncomfortable things like pray with strangers and talk to them and give them things to sustain their needs directly. That is why we're sorrowful like the rich man, because more is required of us. We need to participate in our own salvation. In the Old Testament, we had to simply refrain from murder and not steal from our neighbor. Now we have to give him something, our time, our money, our face and our presence, and by our way, our love. And not just any love, but we need to love our neighbor just as ourselves. By the way, Jesus, by the end, steps that up a couple notches, right? Love your enemies and love one another as I have loved you. So that's even more than loving your neighbor as yourself, right? As fellow Christians, we're to love one another as he has loved us. But in any case, dealing with this particular issue, our face and our presence and our hands and our uncomfortability is what's required of us. And again, I say unto you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And I got to tell you, in college and even in seminary, I heard tell of the eye of the needle is an entrance. It is the name of an entrance in Jerusalem, or was the name of it. And yes, it does appear to that to be true, but that is actually not what the Greek text says, and obviously not what the context said. It's the eye of a needle. Now, needle back in those days was a little bit bigger than the kind of needles that we have today, but it still had an eye, which was very hard to fit a camel through. We weren't talking about an entrance in Jerusalem. We're talking about impossibility. It's impossible for us to be saved. That is the point of the gospel. And yet it still happens. Why? Because with men, and this is how he ends it, with men, it's impossible. The apostles say, who then can be saved? Jesus says, with men, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. That's the gospel message. That the King of all creation has come to us to make the impossible possible. It's not possible for us to be saved, but God makes the impossible possible. So how does the Lord make it possible? Do we have to do nothing? No. Yeah, we do have to do something. So if we're talking salvation, right? Let's just say, for a thought experiment, and perish the thought, but just so you have the visual. Let's say that I'm in the altar, and all of a sudden there's a gas pipe that we didn't know existed under the church, which doesn't exist. A thought experiment, right? And it blows up, and there's a fire back here. Am I going to sit down in my chair and pray to God and the flames will go away? No. Why? Because I need to participate in my own salvation, right? I need to get up and get moving. And if the flame is too big, which it probably is, if it's a gas pipe explosion, and I've survived it, I'm probably not going for the fire extinguisher, which, by the way, is over there if that's something ever would happen with fire. There's another one in the back. But I probably wouldn't, right? But I would need to participate in my own salvation. These doors are shut, so I'm going to go out here. And I'm going to go out, most likely, one of these doors, unless I've lost my mind that day, and get moving as quickly as possible, right? Now, what I've just done was work for my salvation, temporary salvation, in this case, right? Did I earn salvation? No. But did I have to move? Did I have to work? Did I have to do something? Yes. That's what I was explaining last week. Was working, have faith that works, does not mean we earn it, but it does mean we participate in it. We have to do it. There is no such thing as faith without works, because faith without works is dead. And so, the Lord gave us 3 Christian duties to do. Does anyone remember what they are? 3 Christian duties. Prayer,
Fasting, almsgiving.
Almsgiving or charitable giving, right? Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving or charitable giving. Which, by the way, it's interesting. We always mention the giving one last when Jesus mentioned it first. That's right. Let's shove that one a lot. We'd rather do fasting than give. But in any case, He gives us these things. And they say charity begins in the home, and that's true. When you provide for your spouse, both physically and spiritually, whether it be going out and working for them or even help, with the child rearing and everything else, you fulfill Christ's command in the first instance. When you raise your children by feeding them physically and spiritually, you're fulfilling Christ's command in the first instance, because your spouse and your children are your neighbors in your first instance. You are loving your neighbor as yourself. First and foremost, that applies to your neighbor who's laying in the bed right next to you. Unless you did something really bad and she kicked you out of bed or something. But in any case, for the most part, your spouse, your husband or your wife is your first neighbor, and your children, who are your neighbors in the room down the hall, is your neighbor next after that. You are fulfilling, you are beginning in the most important instances that God put before you when you do these things, when you are good to you and do loving works for your spouse and your children. But not just charity begins in the home, but the second Christian duty of prayer begins in the home. And we all need to make a good habit of daily personal prayer. But we also need to pray with our spouse and our children. We need to pray not just for them, but with them. And for this reason, I printed out prayer books for each family here for you to keep them on your prayer corner. And if you don't have a prayer corner, you have to get one now because I made you a present. Right. But I didn't make them individually, but I made them for your family, for you to put it in your family prayer, or even on the dinner table. Because if you put it on your prayer corner, it's collecting dust, it's not working, so put it on the dinner table so you're using it every single day together as a family. That you're praying at least once a day together as a family. It's not just charity begins in the home, prayer begins in the home. Each household should be eating together and praying together at least once in a day wherever possible. If your spouse or children are physically away from them, when you get on the horn, when you get on the phone, say a prayer with them. These books, I don't know why I just put them back here, but these books, I hope will do this for you. Will encourage you to be praying together and to grow as Christians together. And, of all the prayers from the prayer book that I found, there's a prayer of spouses to say together, and there was prayers for parents for their children, children for their parents, but there was actually no, we'll get them at the end. There was no prayer for a family to stay together, for the household to stay together, no matter who it was, grandparents and children, everything. And so I actually wrote one and put it in there so that was not missing. So I underlined that you all need to pray individually, but also together. God grant us the desire for the communion, the daily communion of prayer with you and with one another in you, beginning in our households, Lord. That we may first learn there to truly love our neighbors, in the first instance, our family, our household, as ourselves, and culminating each week in your household of faith that you have given us together. Lord, grant us the grace to desire in the name of the Father, and of the Son,